Automated Podcast.
Welcome to Automated. I'm your host, Mark Verbenkov, and in this weekly podcast, we will be exploring the impact of emerging technology on jobs, society, as well as us, with business and technology leaders, researchers, and independent professionals across the world. So one of the things that the pandemic and specifically the lockdowns has really changed significantly over the last year is the way that we shop. So there's actually been nearly a 40% increase in e-commerce over the last 12 months. But coupled with this is the need to also, of course, social distance when shopping. However, before COVID brought on these changes, there was already an effort to change the way that we shopped into a more automated experience. So my guest this week is Uptin Saiidi, and he comes on to talk about the future of retail and grocery shopping as being realized through Amazon's cashierless Go and the sophisticated fresh stores. We also discuss how in China, Alibaba's Hema store had already implemented similar technologies, enabling a more informed customer and efficient shopping experience. So we also discuss, of course, the issues that revolve around data privacy implications of the tracking technologies that are used in the stores, and what kind of job and social impacts will be realized by these different kinds of initiatives. So Uptin is a journalist and coach based in Dubai and Los Angeles. Today he makes videos for YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram about tech, money, and cultures to his combined audience of 325,000 people. He's reported for MTV News in New York and CNBC International across the US, Europe, and Asia, primarily covering business, tech, and more. He's lived and worked in New York, Singapore, and Hong Kong, reporting across live television as well as digital platforms. Uptin has interviewed hundreds of executives and experts across various platforms, including television, CNBC.com, and for digital videos. And his guest list includes people like Gary Vaynerchick, Bill Nye, and Binance's CEO Chanpeng Zhao, to just name a few. In the episode today, Uptin gives us his personal view on these stores of the future, and I think offers a really important perspective because he's actually visited and used each of them firsthand. So if you've ever been curious about how automation technologies will impact the future of shopping, this episode is definitely for you. Great. Well, thanks for coming on to the Automated Podcast, Uptin. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. So of course, in the pre-intro, I will have talked about the kind of videos that you've prepared on kind of the future of grocery stores and retail in general. I'll of course point the audience towards those. But I think we're going to have an interesting discussion today about like kind of what the experience is like in some of these future stores. I think most people don't use those today. So I think it's kind of an interesting point of view of like how these things work. But maybe to start off the discussion, like what made you initially interested to go into these stores and to get a sense of what they're like?
Well, I'm kind of obsessed with the future. I mean, there's a lot of history buffs out there, and I unfortunately, I wish I could be more interested in history, but I'm always kind of thinking about the future and what that might entail. And also what it is to be American. You know, I think as a person who's born and raised in the US, it's kind of like I grew up where it's kind of like we are the best, you know, the US is the best, and these are the reasons why. And once I moved actually from the US to Asia in 2016 for work as a tech journalist with CNBC, I really started to become fascinated with, wow, is America the best? Is the US the best? You know, there's a lot of really incredible things happening also outside the US. And I think my biggest reward in creating videos is to shine some light on that, is to kind of think about the US audience and show them a part of the world that they had probably a misconceived notion about. And so I think when thinking about that and thinking about technology, China comes top of mind, right?
Yeah.
Because of how advanced it is in automation and facial recognition. And then the advantages to that too, right? So many people are afraid of that, but I truly saw so many advantages, which I'm excited to get into.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a perfect episode how we've structured it. I mean, we'll be talking about Amazon's Go and Amazon's Fresh Shop, and then we'll move over to kind of the Chinese context with Alibaba's Hema. So why don't we start with Amazon Go, because I think this was the one that I first heard about, and also I think I'm still the most interested in, because it's from my perspective, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be like the most automated one out of the three. I know that you've been in one of these, and you've done a video on it. You kind of looked into it a little bit. So maybe you could just kind of paint a picture for the audience. Like what exactly is an Amazon Go store, and then I think we can have quite an interesting discussion based on that.
Yeah, sounds good. So an Amazon Go store, it's funny, it was actually launched, I believe, in 2016. So it's not exactly new. They launched it so currently it's in San Francisco, Chicago, Seattle, and I want to say New York as well. So think cities with large foot traffic, right? LA, they can skip LA, they can skip Texas, Miami. Well, I guess Miami's some foot traffic, but the key here is that it's like an automated 7-Eleven. So how it works is you have to have the Amazon Go app downloaded to your phone. That's the only way you can enter, as far as I'm aware. And you obviously link your Amazon Go account to your Amazon, payment and Amazon account, right? So you pull up your app, you get a QR code, and then there's turnstiles. So just to enter the store, Mark, you have to actually be registered and actually have to scan something just to enter. And then once inside, the store can actually, using a combination of various technologies, from weight sensors of the items to cameras to tracking your movements throughout the store, they're able to literally know that I just picked up a Cliff Bar, that I just picked up a Gatorade, right? It's just like all this data is just being crunched at once to know that I did that. And it is, let me tell you, it's a very, very weird sensation. So one thing I did in my video, just to really, take advantage of this weirdness, was I started putting Cliff Bars into my pocket.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
and it was, I really there was that voice of my inner child, the good angel on the shoulder, being like, what the hell are you doing? But that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's the whole point. There is no checkout process, there is no carts, there is no basket, nothing. So you get whatever items you want, and there are some hot foods as well. There's a lot of sandwiches and things like that. So you get your items, and then the craziest part is you just walk out. It was the weirdest thing. I mean, you don't even, I don't think you even scan, you just walk out. It just knows who you are already. And that was a really, really weird sensation. Again, it was a crazy sensation. I didn't see, for the first 10 or 15 minutes that I was in the store, I didn't see one staff member. Eventually, I did see a woman come out of the back. And what was she doing? Restocking shelves.
Okay.
She was also available for people who had Amazon returns. So if you did want to bring a return to an Amazon Go store, you're able to do that. And then I think there's a bell where you can ring the bell and she'll come out. But for the most part, it was just me by myself in the store in the middle of San Francisco, which has crime has surged, unfortunately, a lot lately. And there I am. And so, yeah, it was a crazy experience. And now I think the plan for Amazon was to launch these stores at a much more rapid rate until COVID occurred. And then because of COVID, a lot less people going to the quick convenience stores, a lot less people going to the office, things like that. So they're still rolling them out, but not at the rate they originally expected.
Do you know, I mean, obviously pre-COVID, what that rate was? I remember reading somewhere that there would be something like almost 1,000 stores available across America by a specific date. I don't know if you
Yeah,
recall that.
I want to say, I think, yeah, I want to say by 2022, they wanted 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was a very aggressive expansion plan to kind of eat up, 7-Eleven. And I think the key, as we know with Amazon, most of us probably already know, it's not about profits, it's about data, right? So I think Amazon probably could care less if it's profitable. I'm sure probably it wasn't, but how much data are they acquiring on each customer? And not just that, Mark, but how much data they're able to capture about the future, what's called just walkout technology. Just walkout technology, they're able to capture a lot of data that they can then actually go and sell to 7-Eleven and go and sell to other, convenience stores globally. So I don't know, for them, maybe they kind of, have enough locations to be able to get the data that they're not as much in a hurry to roll out. But what it seems like to me, and I know we're going to talk about this later, is a lot of the priority, it seems to be around Amazon Fresh, which you can think of as the Safeway of grocery stores.
Yeah. And maybe just to go back to that just walk out technology. So those were I mean, you already mentioned a couple of them, like the potentially facial tracking. There's definitely like weight sensors and other, so I would assume some sort of cameras in order to measure like who is who and where the products are actually going, whether it's into your pocket or your basket, or who the products are going to, so that it can be charged to. Were there any other technologies that you came across that kind of make up this just walk out technology?
Well, the QR code, of course, is a
Mhm.
big part of it. You need the QR code, but yeah, it's mostly, as you mentioned, cameras, weight
Yeah.
sensors, and then a lot of deep learning, a lot of various components of different technology that we've been talking about and
Yeah.
reporting
Yeah.
on over the years, just kind of coming into one.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, one of the, I mean, you already mentioned it a little bit, but of course, the podcast focuses on kind of the impact of work from
Mhm.
these new technologies. So you mentioned that you only saw one staff member in this entire like small-ish 7-Eleven Amazon Go store. Um, I mean, I know that you only saw them for a brief moment, but did they look like bored with their job? Did they look like they were just running around all over the place, like super busy? If there's only like maybe one, maybe two people restocking all the shelves, that's it's a little bit different than I guess how things are done nowadays, where you'd have like almost a small army of people restocking shelves.
Yeah, she did look bored. It's funny you
Yeah.
asked that because she
Mhm.
looked quite bored when she came out. I forget why I think she came to refill something. But yeah, she definitely did look bored, and probably because she's the only one there and she's sitting in the back,
Yeah.
it's like it's
Yeah.
almost like a security guard. I mean, even though, her task wouldn't be to be on security, but yeah, she did look bored. And when we talk about, it's funny, so this video that I posted, I think has something like 20 million views
Hmm.
across
Hmm.
across different social media platforms, and you cannot imagine, or probably can imagine, how many thousands of people commented with anger over the loss of jobs.
Yeah.
Amazon
Yeah.
is ruining and killing jobs. And it's interesting to me. I mean, that's a whole debate for another time, and there's so many different things to consider with that. But I kind of the belief system that jobs, are often replaced. If you look at farming, it used to take half the U.S. population
Yeah.
to be farmers to feed the other half, right? And now it's way less than 1% of the population is into farming. So that's what I believe when it comes to jobs. But also, I think what people fail to realize too is how many people work for Amazon, in the warehouses as delivery people. So yeah, maybe they're not working as cashiers at Safeway, but they're now working, in a warehouse in Amazon, or they're working
Hmm.
in Amazon Fresh Store, in fulfillment, or as a fulfillment in the delivery centers. So it's a very complex issue that, I know is another conversation. But yeah, the one employee that I happened to get a glimpse of at the Amazon Go seemed definitely a little bit bored.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. This is also, I mean, something that comes up on this podcast all the time, right? And I think one of the things that you're highlighting in your experience at this store, and we'll talk about the others as well, is, I mean, you're seeing a very visual experience of where jobs used to be, right? Like where people would
True.
all, as you mentioned, like high foot traffic areas, people would be seeing other people working in the 7-Elevens or in these grocery stores all the time. And now we're kind of, I guess, confronted as a culture with a new type of experience where there are no people there. So it's a very visual example of where there were people and now there isn't. But I think, as you mentioned as well, like there's maybe more people in the background, either developing the technologies, or I mean, I'm sure that the delivery systems would be still in place with a lot of people. So there's, potentially jobs that are changing, jobs that are being destroyed, of course, that are the ones that are very visual, but then also new ones that are being or that are emerging as time goes on, when these kind of new grocery stores, in this example, anyways, are being propped up.
Yeah, yeah, and another thing too. I mean, if you think about what's happening with the kind of jobs crisis in the U.S., where they can't get enough, they can't hire enough people.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's quite interesting. It kind of begs the question of, like, our job, when we talk about jobs, what is worth replacing? Do people dream about being a cashier at a
Yeah.
convenience store? Of course,
Yeah.
some people get fulfillment in that, and that's
Hmm.
beautiful, and it's great, and they should take pride in their job. But should we be crying over the loss of cashiers? That's kind of, I guess, a better question that we can be asking. And like, well,
Hmm.
what other jobs can are created in the process, because there's a lot of issues. We talk a lot about universal basic income and things like that, but I think there's still a lot of issues that need to be solved. I mean, the homeless epidemic. I mean, there's so many different things we can get into in California, particularly, that we could use people working on and helping with, or even volunteering. There's a lot of different facets of that conversation, and I find in general, and I don't want to be one of them. In general, we people tend to look be way too narrow-minded when thinking about, oh my God, is Amazon stealing jobs?
Yeah, of course. Okay, maybe then one of the last questions before we maybe move on to Amazon Fresh, because I think this is also another interesting example. So you had this weird sensation of feeling like you were robbing the store when you were there, but that was on your first time there. Have you since then gone back to the Amazon Go, tried it another time? And if you did that feeling wane a little bit, or was it always kind of a persistent thing?
Yeah, it definitely, so that first time I went, as you mentioned, Mark, it was like, it was just for like almost 20 minutes afterwards. There was still like this part of me that was like, turn around, go back. I mean,
gonna get chased by the cops or something, right?
Yes. So after you walk out of the store, you get a notification through the Amazon Go app where it totals your total. It totals your purchases. So that was interesting too. And it wasn't right away. I mean, in some cases I would visit the store and it would take like 18-20 minutes to get my total, which was really interesting. You would think it would be like right away. So yeah, the first time it was super weird. It did start to simmer down just a little bit, not a lot, but yeah, each time I visited the Amazon Go store, it felt a little less weird, but still certainly weird.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think it's really interesting also for the listeners to hear that, yeah, that feeling might be subsiding after enough times, because this is also something that's really interesting when it comes to new technology, right? Like typically it's a new generation of people that don't have that weird feeling of using, or I mean, in this case, stealing food from a store, but there's just like no previous examples to kind of make them feel a different way about a new technology. Just, oh, it's a new technology and we're going to interact with it in a very native way. But I mean, for you and I, we've been in grocery stores our entire lives with staff members all the time. It might take like, yeah, the older generation to kind of deal with that in a longer time frame, I guess.
Yeah. True.
Why don't we move on then to Amazon Fresh, because I mean it's similar, but I think there was also I mean, some differences. And I think also maybe this is where we can have a bit more of an interesting discussion when it comes to the data that's being processed by these two specific stores. So as you mentioned, like Amazon Fresh is mostly dealing with like fresh groceries, of course, more like a Safeway type store. And also, if I'm not mistaken, it's a little bit bigger, right? So there are more people in there, there's more traffic. Maybe you can touch on like the differences that you experience between Go and Fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amazon Go and Amazon Fresh are very different. Again, a very easy way to think of it is Go is like your 7-Eleven, Fresh is like your Safeway. So Amazon Fresh was actually very large. I mean, it was pretty much the same size as not quite the same size as a Safeway, but it might as well be. I mean, it's a standard size grocery store. And what's really interesting about Fresh, Mark, is that people think that like, oh, at Amazon Fresh, it's automated and you don't see any workers. It was the opposite. I actually saw way, way, way more workers than I've ever seen in a grocery store at Amazon Fresh. Why is that? Because they were fulfilling online orders. Right. So the key with Amazon Fresh is that it's not just a store for the local neighborhood, it's a fulfillment center for the local neighborhood. And the idea here, it was really fascinating the way they integrated technology. So I'll just do a walkthrough of what it's like to go to Amazon Fresh store. So you walk in, there is an option for a smart cart and a regular cart. I don't want to call it a dumb cart, but just a standard, old school
traditional
cart. Yeah. But obviously, I went with the smart cart. And so to unlock the smart cart, again, you use the Amazon app to connect it. And then you're good to go. So it recognizes that this cart belongs to Uptin. Anything that goes inside the cart is going to be charged to Uptin's account. And that's it. So basically I started walking around the store and it was just fascinating. It was like a game for me. So I put in like some flowers, even flowers, it recognized, you just put it in the cart and then you hear this little sound. And then there's a tablet on the front of your cart.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tablet that says, okay, these are flowers, these are $19.99. And that's it. And then you just walk around the store. What was really interesting and quite annoying though was produce. So like oranges, you had to actually manually input a number from the station of the fruit, and then say how many you wanted. So like things that were super easy is obviously packaged goods, your cereals, your pasta sauce, salsa, bag of chips. That was super easy. But anything fresh, like even a donut, that was annoying because I had to like input, and the codes were like 4 or 5 digits. It took a little while. So you would have to input the numbers and things like that. So it really, and I asked this question in my video where I reported on it. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm saving much time. This is actually quite annoying.
Right.
In some regards, but of course, this was just their first year as Amazon Fresh. So God knows what it's going to look like in 2, let alone 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really fascinating. And one thing I did at one point, Mark, was to actually take a few items out. And sure enough, without a beat, the cart was able to recognize that the item had been removed. And they assumed I put it back on the shelf, of course. But what was also crazy was that on the screen of the cart, there's a running total of everything I'm buying, which I thought was really interesting choice by Amazon, because usually what happens when we go into a grocery store, we have 3 items on our list, we end up buying 10 items, and then we get to the register and we're like, oh my God, I just spent $88. I thought I was going to spend 20 or 30, right? Oh, well. So what was crazy is like walking around the Amazon Fresh store, I'm able to see, wow, I'm already at $46. Like maybe I should call it a day. Maybe I shouldn't get that extra, cup of whatever. And so that kind of really changed the process from a shopper's perspective in favor of the shopper, which again surprised me a little bit. But what was it? Amazon I guess had the option of not showing the total, but I think that would feel really weird. That would feel really weird because I would look at my screen and say, well, wait a minute, what's in here, right? I mean, they could show me all the items and then kind of block the price tags, but I think that would feel quite unnerving because every time we see screens and receipts, we're used to seeing the item with the price. So that was really interesting. And then in terms of the human component, like I said, Mark, there were more employees than there were customers, because they were just all doing online fulfillment. They were testing things out. So they were getting the orders from online and going and filling those carts to be sent out for delivery. And that was quite fascinating. In some ways, I felt like I was in an Amazon warehouse and I wasn't supposed to be there. Again, it probably the same thing with Amazon Go. It's a very new, unnerving feeling to see all these employees next to me, like running around filling carts, right? And in some cases, I felt like I was in their way, and I'm sure I was. I mean, imagine you're working there 40, 50 hours a week. The biggest obstacle you have to fulfilling your orders, which we know how Amazon works. Their timing, everything's, every employee is being timed of how efficient they are, right? So the biggest obstacle is the customer. The customer is not someone they want to greet and smile at and help with their purchases. They want to say, get out of my freaking way. So yeah, Amazon Go and Amazon Fresh could not really be, more different, but Amazon Fresh was a really fascinating experience. And one more thing I want to say, which I think is really, really important, is after I walked out of the Fresh store, I have my nice little receipt, sent to my email and in the app. And it really begs the question of, in 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever, when I'm like, okay, I need to go to the grocery store again, my brain is just saying like, well, why would you go and do that yourself when you can literally just go on the app and hit, delivery, right? It's like I know exactly what I'm gonna get. It's like it's just such a waste of time. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what Amazon wants. Maybe if they imagine 50% of their revenue coming from customers, in-store customers, versus 50% online, maybe their idea is to get it to 90% delivery, and not, have customers if they really want to come. But for the most part, who the heck wants to come? Because once I've done through the, a lot of people like to say, I couldn't order my groceries online. I want to see it, touch it, smell it, see where it's coming from. But after a couple of times of doing that, it's, more or less the same. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. Because like with me, I think Amazon Fresh was a really good example where I loved the experience, but next time, I didn't go back. I just started to hit, deliver.
That's really interesting. That was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about. Like your experience, of course, is novel, it's new, it's interesting because of that. But to me, it didn't sound like it was an enjoyable experience, right? There wasn't like a host welcoming you into the store. There weren't people like telling you about like, hey, shop here. It didn't sound like it was like a customer friendly experience, especially if you're having to like dodge all these fulfillment people, staff members running around all over the place. So yeah, I guess my question is like, was it, or do you think that the experience is maybe set up in such a way to nudge people towards using the online services more, right? So you go into the store the first time, you get a sense of what it's like, and then as you said, there's this online, it's almost like it makes it easier for you to order online rather than going back to the store after that you've had that initial experience.
Yes, exactly. I wouldn't say I felt like this, I felt unwelcome or dissuaded by any
Mhm.
means. It wasn't like quite like that, but I certainly didn't feel, it wasn't like I'm trying to think of like Chick-fil-A customer service, right? Where it's like, it's my pleasure, they're trained
Yeah,
to
yeah,
really like make you feel special. It certainly was far from that. I mean, your average Safeway, I definitely would have felt better as a customer, just by the average staff at a Safeway versus this Amazon Fresh experience. In fact, I did ask a few questions to people that were doing fulfillment, like where's this, where's that, and again, they weren't rude by any means, but they certainly were not eager to help,
yeah.
understandably so, perhaps, because that's probably not in their job description,
Mhm.
and then I think, and then of course, because it was new, I visited the one in Woodland Hills in California. This was last August, so just like 2 months
Mhm.
after it opened, or a couple months after it opened. And so of course, there was someone to explain the smart card and kind of get us
Okay,
going and
okay.
stuff. So it's not like my experience was completely, no human interaction. But for the most part, yeah, I do think that Amazon does want you to say, yeah, come experience it, see firsthand, grab your groceries, since that's what you
Mhm.
you humans like to do. But eventually, like, just sit at home and open the app. And ultimately, why is that? If you think about it, it's to take market share, I imagine, from grocery stores, right? Amazon
Mhm.
has
Mhm.
not traditionally been anywhere that and no one thinks of Amazon for their groceries, right? We go to Safeway, to Raley's, to Ralph's, to whatever, wherever we live, Kroger's. And so this is a really smart way for Amazon to start to take that market share, because let's be honest, the traditional grocery stores are not going to be able to create this kind of technology, even within a
Yeah.
delivery app, because they just don't have the data and the experience and the head start
Yeah.
on customer experience online. So
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Maybe then connected to that, when you got your receipt, and maybe if you did some research after your experience, like, do you know what to what extent, like, or what kind of data was actually collected from your experience? Like, of course, the decision to maybe put some items into your cart and then take them out, or like I would assume that there would be some sort of tracking system on the cart itself to know where you navigated across around the store to then maybe guess like what kind of products you would be choosing, or maybe even predicting in the future like what other products you would choose based on your previous experiences. Were there any other kind of insights that you got on kind of the data that was being captured from your time there?
from what I've researched, I do, yeah, I do
Mhm.
understand that all of what you said is being gathered. That's a good point. Like, something was in my cart and then it came out of my cart, but like it was for my vlog, for my YouTube,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hopefully it didn't impact my customer profile too much. But even greeting cards, by the way, I was really surprised, because like even a greeting card with the envelope could so simply and easily, I
Yeah.
kept putting it in and out just to try and trick it, and I couldn't. But yeah, in terms of all that data, we all know by now, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners, that all that technology is available. So Amazon can certainly say, okay, my profile is this. How much time did I spend in produce? How much time did I spend in packaged
Mhm.
goods? And kind of make assumptions about me and my future purchases. How probably they know to a T how likely I am to order online next time. What I'm likely to order, and all sorts of information gathering as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I did get a sense that all of that is captured, I don't know. There was even a few Alexa devices throughout the store.
Right,
So I
right.
did, of course, go and talk to Alexa and ask her a couple questions. I think I asked like, where is the I don't know, the salsa or something, what aisle? And she didn't know. She couldn't help me. But as we're talking now, it makes me wonder: does Amazon know that I asked Alexa that I needed to know?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it that kind of smart that they could identify that my smartphone was next to the Alexa and I'm the one who asked that question? That would be really interesting. I don't see. I mean, I know it could if it wanted to, but I'd be curious if it finds that relevant, and if
Yeah.
it incorporates that data into its customer profiles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I mean, it's very interesting to kind of I guess analyze or even in some cases guess or assume like what kind of data is being collected, and then for what kind of uses, right? Is it to just nudge you towards buying more products online, or is it to kind of figure out what these fulfillment centers / grocery stores are actually supplying people when they're there? One of the things that I found interesting, and I think you mentioned it already, was that there were these kind of old traditional carts there for people to use. It wasn't just the smart carts. Um, uh, did you get a sense that there were more people, like more customers, using the smart carts as kind of a novel experience, or did people just feel more comfortable using the older ones when they were there?
So I think in my experience, the few times that I've gone, I would say it was about half half.
Okay.
Obviously I don't have enough data to really
Yeah.
come up with any conclusions there. And there weren't a lot of people, to be honest. It certainly was not crowded, but that could have also just been the time of day I went and this and that. But yeah, it was about half the people were using smart carts. It was actually, I would actually get excited to see someone else with a smart cart because I was like on this journey with them, and I'm like, oh, how's it going for you? Good, good. But then when they use the regular carts, it's just like they were just there because it was maybe the closest store, or the prices were good or whatever. But so what does that mean? That means that there are also traditional humans working in the cash register,
Yes. Yes.
for those who decide to use the standard cart, right? So for those of you, and I haven't talked about this yet, for people like me who obviously want to use the smart cart, at the end there is a section. It's kind of like, you walk into Walmart and you see self-checkout and regular checkout, but instead of you have your regular checkout, you have a couple of humans working, and then instead of self-checkout, you just have this, like, it's kind of like, almost think of it like a mini runway. I mean, it was like this pad with arrows saying, only go once you're ready to check out. It was kind of like this ceremonious moment. And so you basically just walk your cart along this like large pad with arrows, pointing to the exit of the store. And that was it. I think there might have been a sound that was triggered, like,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was it. And then immediately on the tablet, it said your total, you've checked out, da 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 da. And I got a notification on my phone saying my total. And it was like this, it was like, so, like we talked about the Amazon Go, that it felt like kind of this, anticlimactic moment where I'm like, I just walk out, nothing, that's it. I don't, get out my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
But at least with Amazon Fresh, I did feel like closure to my grocery store experience. And that was that, like, again, that moment at the end where you walk, along the pad on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Well, maybe they took the lessons from the Amazon Go and implemented it into Amazon Fresh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but it certainly didn't feel like a like uneasy. It wasn't like, ooh, this was too weird. I
Mm-hmm,
didn't feel
mm-hmm.
like kind of uneasy from the experience. I actually felt it was kind of cool. And I'll be honest, I said earlier in this episode that there were moments where I was like, is this really saving me time? By the time I
Right.
had my two grapefruits with the code and I was like, this is really annoying. But then, of course, the ending is where you realize the time that was saved, because you literally don't have to get anything out of your cart. You don't have to wait in any line. There is no small talk. Don't get me wrong, I love people, but
Yeah, yeah.
you're literally just done. You just walk and you're done. So I guess that's kind of the, you spend maybe a little bit more time in the process of shopping, so that by the time you're finished, putting the items in your cart, you're done. You're literally just able to
Mm-hmm,
walk out
mm-hmm.
of the store.
Yeah, and maybe this goes back to one of the first things that you said, like these Amazon Fresh stores are very new, right? So this could just be kind of a piloting phase where they're trying to figure out these little bugs or these little kinks in the process, and then upgrade them or change these things over the next year or so that the experience is a little bit more free flowing and it is a little bit more efficient. So hopefully both your videos and if Amazon watches this podcast, they can pick up on those things and change it if need be. Um, I, I am trying to keep track of the time here. I do want to maybe move on to the experience that you had in China because I think it's both different, but it's also interesting for the audience because although I've talked about China a number of times, I haven't had somebody come on and actually talk about their experience with some of these kind of newer technologies in China. So I'm actually very interested to hear again what you have to say. So if I could ask you again to maybe just give a little bit of your experience about your time in Alibaba's, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Hema, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. So yeah, the Alibaba Hema story is obviously we know, Alibaba is the Amazon of China. And so they launched a grocery store called Hema, which is similar but also quite different. It's actually so when I visited over 3 years ago now, it was there was no smart cart experience. But the way that it worked, it was similar in that it's like a fulfillment center as well as a grocery store experience. So I went there in 2018. And so that's over 3 years. That's 3 years now. So it was meant to be efficient for the customer. But one thing that I found really interesting is that it was a lot more geared at information for the customer. So every item had like a QR code. And this is 2018. Before, as an American, I didn't know what the heck a QR code was. Now it's very common, especially COVID. But so you could go to any item and you could scan the QR code, and it would tell you exactly like the blueberries, which farm they came from. It would show you the certificate that it was actually organic. Because trusting suppliers is not as seamless as it is in the US and other countries, right? So you could actually look it all within a few seconds. You could see okay, this is truly organic. They've uploaded the copy of the certificate. You could see the day that the blueberries or blackberries, whatever, were picked, and the travel time. I mean, it was fascinating, all that information. And then also they sell seafood, which seafood is a really big deal, in a lot of cultures, but especially in China, because people are really adamant that they pick it out, they look at it. I mean, literally they would grab a lobster out of a tank, I mean, with the help of a staff, and they would literally just hold it up to the light. Like, I've never seen that in the US, those are some of the reasons why someone would still go in store. But I certainly felt the same in that both Hema and Amazon Fresh, in both of these stores, I felt like after you go one or two times, you don't want to go ever again, because it's so seamless and easy to just order on the app. And I think that's a much bigger deal in China. I mean, US as well, but for Chinese, especially with groceries, the idea of ordering food online was probably very hard to come by, especially for the older generation who grew up with a much more different economic situation. So for them, the Hema stores are a lot about educating and making customers feel comfortable. Okay, this is exactly where my food is coming from, but instead of me picking it up, the workers will pick it up. But another key difference between Amazon and Alibaba stores, where in the Alibaba Hema store, it was actually quite stressful, because I mean, in that store, you have workers that are doing fulfillment orders for online orders running. I mean, they were running around the store, because we think that in Amazon the restriction, the employees have to like make their quotas and this and that. I can only imagine what it was, how closely they monitor their average time to fill a cart and this and that. So I mean, they were running across the store. You've seen in Costco where they put the money in like the pipes.
Pneumatic tubes that go up.
The pneumatic tubes. That's so cool. Yeah. So they had something similar in Alibaba's Hema stores, where they would fill the cart of the online order, and instead of like walking to the other end of the store, they would put it like in this like conveyor belt that would like lift it to the ceiling, and then the conveyor belt would like bring it across the store. And it was like, I mean, I'm literally in like this all automated factory, trying to buy my groceries. So that was definitely interesting. But yeah, same like Amazon Fresh, there was a lot more employees than there were customers. And then the checkout process was all done through a kiosk through Alipay, which is their big payment service there. So yeah, a lot of similarities. I mean, at the time, obviously, the Alibaba Hema store was much more advanced than anything I'd ever seen in a grocery store concept. But now, and it's not fair to compare them because I'm comparing 2 years apart.
Yep.
But now, their Amazon Smart Cart definitely, impressed me quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to maybe pick out a couple things that you said, I think it's really interesting that you said both like warehouse for Amazon Fresh and like factory for the Hema store. To me, it really sounds like the shift is much less focused on the consumer, and it's more towards like the efficient processing of goods that benefits that exactly that benefits the bottom line of the organization that's actually building this. And I also really like what you said that. And I hadn't thought about this before, actually. Like, it didn't make sense to me why there were staff in the stores that were processing the orders. Like, why would there people be running in these stores? Why not just have a whole separate like actual warehouse where they can do that? But it now makes sense if maybe the goal of these new stores is to just get people comfortable with where their food is coming from, so that there isn't this kind of like black box warehouse where people don't actually know where their stuff is coming from. It's like, okay, well, I went there, I ordered, I know what's going on there. It might make it a little bit more comfortable for the average consumer to now start using the online apps or software in order to buy their food from these fulfillment center warehouse slash future grocery stores. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
and yeah, that's a really good point. And then also, if you think about grocery in general, the margins are already very, very low,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're very low. So then if you add into the mix that produce can go bad very fast, people want it fresh. It has a very limited shelf life compared to other packaged goods and things. So if I'm Jeff Bezos and I want to open in, I don't know, Phoenix, it's like, yeah, I could have a distribution center and then a couple grocery stores, but if I can all combine it into one or two,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
the heck wouldn't I? So yeah, I think that's what people don't understand when they think about grocery stores of the future. They think they're going to be unmanned like the Amazon Go, but it's like, actually, you're going to see way more employees and humans than you've ever seen in a store before.
Right.
But then it's smart, not just because of I mean, the bottom line for these companies, but also for me as a customer. It's like, if I can get, if my delivery time could be 30 minutes instead of an hour and a half, hey, I'm really happy,
Yeah, yeah.
So that's something to kind of consider as well. I think I was reading that a few Macy's were turned into like Amazon distribution center.
The Macy's that went bankrupt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think so. A couple locations are actually being used as like Amazon fulfillment because Amazon said like, well, wow, Macy's is in the primary center of these towns and cities usually, right? So if we can like dispatch, inventory quicker and use that space, why
Yeah,
wouldn't we?
yeah,
So.
yeah. It makes perfect sense. I also want to touch on one of the differences between the Chinese examples versus the American ones. So you did mention that you used Alipay to pay for the eventual total of your groceries, but I think there was also a facial recognition system that you would just have to look into a screen and it would obviously recognize your face, and then the total would be subtracted from that. So I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I haven't had anybody actually use it. So maybe you could touch on that, because I think it's just kind of a very interesting, different technology that maybe the West isn't super used to yet.
Oh yeah, it was so fascinating. So I've been to actually Alibaba's headquarters, and facial recognition was just left and right. I mean, it's what they use to enter the campus.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
it's not required, it's not every employee did it, but many did, and I could see why. Your company knows what your face looks like already. So, so it was really interesting. I mean, I would see people with Starbucks, right? They would get their Starbucks for them and their colleagues. Their hands are full, right? So they just walk onto campus. They don't even blink an eye because the camera just detects them, and then the bar is open and they're able to enter the campus. Same thing with the cafeteria at Alibaba. Same thing at Xiaomi. I visited Xiaomi, Huawei. I mean, all these companies are using Baidu was a big one, the Google of China.
Right.
They were really into facial recognition. I mean, even the vending machines had facial recognition. So you click on the drink you want, you show your face, and within seconds, you have your drink in hand. So for them, it is becoming very, very common and popular. And I see why. It's extremely convenient. If the security is good, then why not? If I don't have to get out a wallet and a credit card and swipe a piece of plastic, great. So that's what we've traditionally done. Right now, we're moving toward mobile payments where it's like Apple Pay. We can quickly just show our cell phone. But in China, China skipped the kind of has been in mobile payments for years and years now. But now it seems to be getting more and more toward pay with your face. And so yeah, that you could do that at the Alibaba Hema store. You could do that, I think, at some KFCs as well in China.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've even saw it at McDonald's on a kiosk. Pay with face was an option. So it seems like it's very convenient, and and I can see why people would choose to do it. And then, of course, you have a lot less privacy concerns in general in China than you do in the West, which is quite interesting as well. But yeah, I mean, I personally am fascinated and kind of excited for pay with face technology, especially because it's novel right now. But I think it's the future, and I think it's very kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be also really interesting to kind of follow and then see whether the West actually fully adopts it, right? Especially over COVID, there were lots of concerns of using facial recognition for like, tracking whether people were actually sick or they had like a fever or they looked potentially sick. So I think there were a lot of like bans on facial recognition, certainly here in Europe. So there was like a regression away from this technology. But I think this might actually be one of the first times that I've heard that facial recognition is so much more convenient. I actually hadn't thought of it before, but it makes complete sense. If your hands are full, right, you're not going to put down your grocery bags or your coffee or whatever. You're just going to look into a screen and take the picture and then move on. So yeah, I think it'll be quite interesting to see if the cultural shift happens.
Yeah, and think about this. I mean, so many airports use it now. It's like I just flew out of Dubai, and it's like you have to, every single person, you show your passport, and then you show your face, and then it opens the gate, right?
Yeah.
That might feel weird 5 years ago, but I think it starts with government entities like or like things like airports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to use the airport. We and it's a security thing, and it makes our life more convenient. So then we get comfortable with it, and then slowly over time we are more comfortable with it in other facets, like a grocery store. I like to use the example of, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you would search a flight New York to LA, and then you go to a few other websites, and all of a sudden you see a banner ad for, flights from New York to LA. That creeped us out. Remember how weird that was, how invasive that was? And now it's like, we don't blink an eye. So, that's kind of just how technology is adopted. And I think you're exactly right. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here in the US and in the West in general, because government regulation. I think there was just a county in Washington state that said to do a complete ban on facial recognition technology. Even Amazon Go, I know a few years ago, faced a lawsuit in the city of San Francisco because they were saying, hey, this store is discrimination against people without, credit, right? If you don't have a credit card, how the heck do you use this store? So, I'm not sure what the outcome was, but I think Amazon had to create some sort of thing where people could top up with cash at another store and then be able to use the store or something, right? So there are certainly these things that are going to, and are already, let's say, I don't want to say inhibiting, but like definitely slowing down the rate of technological acceptance by the West. That's just not going to happen in China, for better or worse. I'm sure a lot of people listening are cringing at how pro this technology I am, and saying, what about privacy, slippery slope this and all that. But it's, I think one thing go ahead. I'll stop.
No. I was just completely agreeing with you. I mean, I think this is one of the things, whenever the discussion around data privacy and data security comes around, it's the conversation always goes towards the differences between China and specifically the United States, right? So, and then you can even talk about Europe, which I think is even more concerned about the data privacy of the individual citizens. But yeah, I think the one thing that I always go to is like, what is going to be the impact on the actual development of and acceptance of the technology, and then what are the ramifications of that for society? Like, is China just going to become more efficient, more productive because of these technologies that, even though they infringe on the individual kind of sovereignty of the human being, it enables a much more, I guess, fluid or efficient and productive society on like many different aspects. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but it's always a place that these conversations go to for me anyways.
Yeah, no, I have actually a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, the first is when I would film at these tech companies in their campus, I would go to like Baidu, as I mentioned, Huawei, and I would just go up to employees that are sitting at their desk and just start filming them. And I've been to many offices in Europe and US and China for CNBC as a reporter, and I film them, obviously with the permission of the PR person and the company and all that kind of guiding me around. But I know, like, if I do that in the US, people look up and then their colleague has to say, oh, they're shooting for CNBC, or and sometimes people will say, I don't want to be filmed. Like, what the heck? I'm at work. Who is this? In China, Mark, people don't even look up.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't believe I'm just like, 2 feet away from their ass filming them, a stranger filming them as they're working. They're not even curious what's going on. They just could care less.
So different.
Yeah. They just don't have a sense of why am I being filmed? They just do not, in general, they do not say that, the ones that I've come into contact with. And I would, as an American who lived in Asia for 4 years, I would get into debates with my friends because of how kind of bullish I was on this future technologies. And they would say, how can you say this? Privacy concerns this, slippery slope that. And I think the reason that I have become kind of, very accepting of these future technologies is because of what I saw with safety and security.
Okay.
When you think about, the unfortunate shootings, random mass shootings we have in the United States, when you think about, unfortunately school shootings that occurred, it's like imagine if we could, reduce a lot of these things because of technology. That's I mean, it's of course I'm oversimplifying the problem, but that's just really where my head's at. And it's also, as a journalist, right, I've talked to a lot of people in China, a lot of foreigners who are living in China. One executive that comes to mind, he's originally Australian. He's raised his 2 kids in Shanghai, and he was telling me he goes to London and there was a street fight, a bar fight or whatever, and his kids were literally shaking so hard because they just didn't see anything. Like, they don't even hear sirens in Shanghai, and so and he was thinking, like, how lucky I am to be raising my kids in a place where I never have to worry about their safety and crime rates and things like that. But he also was concerned too. So when he got back to Shanghai, he would make his little kids watch like cops shows, just to like toughen them up a little bit.
Yeah. Expose them to the real world a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so hearing somebody like him, who arguably started out being pro privacy, pro this, and how his perception was changed because he was able to appreciate all the advantages of a more secure world. It's kind of like, with going through the airport security, right? It's like, I don't feel like it's an invasion of privacy because I understand the greater good of this technology is, and these inconvenience are to keep me safe in the sky, right? And as long as we don't have anything to hide, then why should we, then why should I kick and scream? And so I think, that's kind of where my mindset goes, just to a more, maybe the next degree of that. But that's why I think 2 things. I think a lot of this technology is coming, with or without our approval, and I see the benefits of why it's coming, and that's kind of my stance.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I also think it's quite it's unique and interesting to hear somebody who has maybe a different perspective from, like, many of the people. Like, of course, I interview many people from the Western world on the podcast, and as I mentioned before, like, one of the main concerns is, of course, data privacy. So we need to stop either facial recognition or other technologies that are going to come out that are going to, cause potential long-term problems for the individual. And then the argument is always, well, safety issues are great, but that's just kind of I think it's a red herring, right? It's leading us to this eventual. I mean, there's lots of people that talk about these, digital surveillance states, but they're using the argument of safety and security to get us to these places. But I do think it always is interesting and relevant to kind of hear the opposite side, that for yourself that you've actually experienced this kind of culture, and for others that have experienced both cultures as well, and they have the perspective of, oh, okay, maybe sometimes the security is actually better if we're talking about kids or other situations like that.
Yeah, and I know I get it's controversial, especially as an American saying that, but yeah, I guess it just comes down to ultimately, like having my phone snatched out of my hand while walking through London versus, you know, like living in Singapore. And literally I did a video on this where I left my phone, laptop, and even wallet, you know, on a table. And then I went and ordered lunch, you know, 100 feet away or whatever, and then came back and then proved, yep, it's all there. It's, I mean, one of the lowest crime rates in the world. So, but of course, you know, there are things that need to be considered. And, you know, I appreciate the debate. Let's just put it that way.
It's very important, I think.
Yes, it is important.
Whichever side you take, it's important to talk about.
Agreed. Yeah.
Great. So I see that the time is almost up here. Maybe we can just talk. The question that I love to end all these podcast discussions on are like the future of whatever topic that we're talking about. So we were talking mostly about retail and grocery store shopping. I mean, I can already kind of assume what your idea is, right? It's moving away from the physical, you know, brick and mortar store towards online ordering. Do you see that as, you know, taking maybe 10, 20 years to happen? Are drones going to be used rather than human beings to, you know, place these fulfillment orders? You also mentioned the aspect of like the conveyor belts and maybe a factory fulfillment center. Do you see that those centers becoming more automated? Like, what's your, especially from somebody who's actually experienced these firsthand, like, do you have a vision of like where the future of this is going?
I think traditional grocery shopping that we see as, you know, utility, I need these items, you know, we're going to see a lot of that. Yeah, I think it's in the next, let's say 10 years where, you know, we're going to see a huge shift. Maybe it'll be, I don't want to give numbers, but I think we're going to see a huge shift, and we're going to see it kind of be the norm when needing to get groceries. But then what's going to happen is, I think, same thing like what's happened to our malls, right? Over the past like 5-10 years, where it's like, oh my God, our malls are boring. Let's make them experiential. Let's have yoga classes. Let's have open air restaurants. Let's do, you know, raves and bring different influencers and celebrities in to give talks or whatever. I think we're going to see that with grocery stores. I mean, I was in a grocery store in Italy with some friends, and literally they have like a bar. So you walk into the grocery store, and it's not like a unique thing. It's just a normal grocery store. You walk in, you go to the bar, you have like either a coffee or a cocktail or even just like a club soda. And it's, you know, there's no plastic cups. It's all like you sit there and you stand at the bar and you enjoy a drink. I'm looking at my friend who's Italian, who grew up in this town, and I'm like, what are we doing? And he's like, we're just having a drink. I'm like, I thought we're here to buy some stuff for your mom. And he's like, we will. Like, what rush? Why are you in a rush? So I don't know. I mean, is that coming to America? I don't think necessarily that's coming to America, but I think we're going to start to think about more experiential shopping even within the grocery space. So like even in Dubai, where I'm partially based, I remember like I spent a lot of time at the Dubai Mall, which is the world's largest mall and stuff. And it's funny because when I first moved there, I'm like, oh, malls, you know, malls schmalls, right? Malls are so boring. I hate malls. I'm over malls. But I really love going to the mall in Dubai. And I think a lot of that is because there's a lot of things to do. There's different people to, you know, there's people watching, there's people to meet, there's different cafes, there's different experiences. There's so much discoverability amongst that, you know, my time at the mall. And so I think that we are going to eventually, probably in 5-10 years, think about grocery stores, believe it or not, as an experience. And that could mean like, you know, the seafood counter that grills your seafood in front of you. And of course you pay a premium for that. But I think that's ultimately what's going to come next. Is we're going to have our utility grocery shopping is going to be mostly done online, but then we're going to go to the grocery store, believe it or not, because we want to, you know, like cooking classes or like live demonstrations. I think we're going to see a lot of that. Italy, have you been to an Italy? There's one.
No, I don't think I have. I went to like Itza back in San Francisco when it was still around, but that was just yet another kind of like Amazon Go automated experience.
Oh, okay. I did see that. Yeah. So Italy, for those who don't know, it's like an open air grocery store. It was started in New York. Now they have them throughout the world. There's not a lot of them. There's probably less than a dozen, but it's an open air grocery store. But then they have like different pockets where you can like go to an oyster bar. You can like, you know, maybe watch a demonstration and have a drink. And so I think that's what we're going to see more of in the grocery space. Will it be done by Amazon? Well, I'm inclined to say no, because Amazon is traditionally, you know, low price, but Amazon's on its mission to take over the world. So let's be honest, we will see it by Amazon.
I think that's a perfect place to end, Uptin. Well, thank you very much for kind of sharing that future vision. It's definitely one that I would not have thought of. It kind of goes contrary to a lot of the ideas that I was thinking. So I always love hearing other people's perspectives on kind of what's going to happen for the specific sector that we're talking about.
Well, now I'm just really curious. Were you thinking everything is app delivery online, app online?
Yeah. I was thinking way more efficient and productivity would kind of be the baseline aspects, and that the human would be kind of taken out of these experiences, especially as I think Amazon's like also experimenting with like drone delivery, and there's a number of these like drone startups that are actually delivering in urban centers. But again, this is all like, very early pilot stage, so I mean, who's to know?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I see that our time is up. I mean, I know that you have videos kind of all over the place on most social media platforms. Where would you like people to go to follow your work and see what other kind of interesting tech and business things that you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I make 3 videos a week about tech, money, and cultures across all platforms. So, wherever you like to spend the most time, I appreciate the follow or the subscribe. So on YouTube, my YouTube is just very easy. It's youtube.com/Uptin, Uptin. And actually it's the same for Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm just /Uptin on all of those platforms. So yeah, would love to connect with people, and people can follow my work there.
Terrific. Well, I'll have all those links on the show notes, so people can check it out in an easy click. Uptin, thanks a lot for coming onto the podcast. It was great talking to you, and thanks for sharing your experience with these kind of interesting future stores, which, as I mentioned before, I don't think too many people have seen. So I think it's quite interesting for them to hear about.
Yeah, they haven't seen them yet, Mark.
Yeah,
it's only a matter
exactly.
of time. Well, thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed this.
Right on. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast and the conversations here, the best way to do this is to go onto Apple Podcasts and leave a review, as it helps the algorithm to reach out to new listeners and brings the show to them. Also, feel free to check out the website, automatedpodcast.org, where you can find the show notes for each episode, written articles on the themes of the podcast, and a library of resources on the topic of emerging tech and automation. Also, if you want to reach out and leave any feedback, or you have any questions about the podcast or any of the conversations, there are general contact links such as email, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. for you there on the website. And finally, for those of you that want more than just an audio conversation, the video recordings are now going to be up on YouTube for the newer conversations, so feel free to check out the videos by searching for Automated Podcast on YouTube, where of course you can like and subscribe if you prefer to support the podcast that way.
The Automated Podcast.